What would you do if the maid who saved your child's life turned out to be richer than you? Would you still see her as just a servant, or would you realize she's worth more than money itself? And can true love survive when the truth about wealth and identity is finally revealed? Collision. The Saturday sun blazed down on the luxurious Eco Pearl Hotel in Lagos. The poolside was alive with chatter. Wealthy guests in designer outfits sipped cocktails, while their children splashed under the watch of uniformed nannies. Among the workers moving quietly in the background was Amara, dressed in her plain gray maid's uniform, carrying a tray of drinks with careful balance. Her eyes, though calm, carried a story of hardship. Every step she took reminded her of her hidden reality. Once the daughter of one of the richest men in Nigeria, now reduced to scrubbing tables, far away from the media lights that once followed her. At the far side of the pool sat David Johnson, the 8-year-old son of Adewale Johnson, one of Nigeria's top billionaires. The boy had slipped away from his bodyguards, too restless to sit still. Curious and playful, he leaned over the edge of the pool to grab a floating toy. His small fingers stretched, slipped, and before anyone could react there was a splash. Screams echoed. "Somebody help. The boy is drowning," shouted one of the hotel guests. The security detail froze for a second, panicking as David's tiny hands flailed helplessly in the water. Amara's instincts overrode everything. She dropped the tray, glasses shattering against the floor, and ran without hesitation. Her shoes flew off as she dove into the pool, the water swallowing her whole. Through the blur of chlorine she reached David, his eyes wide with fear, bubbles escaping his mouth. With strong strokes she pulled him up, wrapping her arm firmly around his small chest. Breaking the surface she gasped for air and shouted, "Hold on. I've got you." She dragged him to the edge where the bodyguards finally regained their senses. But David was unconscious. Water trickled from his lips. The crowd panicked. Some shouted for a doctor, others simply stood frozen. Amara, shaking but determined, laid the boy flat on the poolside tiles and began chest compressions. Her palms pressed rhythmically against his small chest. 1, 2, 3, breathe, she whispered desperately. She tilted his head, gave him 2 quick breaths, then pressed again. The boy coughed suddenly, choking up water. His tiny chest heaved as life returned. Relief swept over the crowd, but before anyone could cheer, a powerful voice roared. "David!" Adewale Johnson came rushing through, his tailored suit damp with sweat, his face pale with terror. He fell to his knees beside his son, clutching the boy's hand. His eyes darted to Amara, the maid who was still kneeling, drenched, hair clinging to her face. For a moment their worlds collided. The billionaire and the maid. His breathing slowed as realization struck. She had saved his only child. Amara tried to stand, trembling, but David's small fingers reached out, clutching her wrist tightly. His faint voice croaked. "Don't go, Auntie." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Adewale's gaze softened, his usual mask of authority cracking. For the first time in years, gratitude filled his eyes. The hotel's executive lounge was unusually silent that evening. A storm of emotions still lingered after the near tragedy. Adewale Johnson sat stiffly in a leather armchair, his eyes fixed on a glass of untouched champagne. Across from him, his closest friend and business partner, Kunal, spoke carefully. "You should be celebrating, Adewale. Your boy is alive, and because of her." Adewale didn't respond. His mind kept replaying the image of the drenched maid, her trembling hands pressing life back into his son's chest, her wide eyes filled with determination. Not one of his trained bodyguards had moved as fast as she did. Finally he muttered, "Who is she?" "Amara," Kunal answered. "One of the hotel maids. She's been here a few months. Quiet. Keeps to herself." Adewale leaned back, his jaw tightening. "A maid risked her life for my son, when men I pay millions froze. I need to see her." Downstairs in the dimly lit staff quarters, Amara sat on her narrow bed, still wrapped in a towel. Her uniform was draped over a chair, damp and smelling of chlorine. Her hands shook as she remembered the little boy's pale face, the weight of his limp body in her arms. She had promised herself to live quietly, unnoticed. But today had torn down the wall she built around her identity. "Why didn't I just wait for someone else to jump?" she whispered to herself. But she already knew the answer. She couldn't watch a child die, not when she had the power to save him. A knock interrupted her thoughts. The door creaked open and the head supervisor entered nervously. "Amara, Mr. Johnson wants to see you. Now." Her stomach tightened. The billionaire? She had heard of his reputation, ruthless in business, cold in his dealings. She had no desire to stand in his presence. But refusing wasn't an option. In a private lounge overlooking the glittering Lagos skyline, Adewale waited. When the door opened and Amara stepped in, his gaze immediately locked on her. She looked even smaller out of uniform, her damp hair tied back, her modest clothes worn but neat. Yet something about her posture, quiet, almost regal, made her stand out. "Sit," he said softly, gesturing to the chair across from him. Amara hesitated, then obeyed. For a long moment neither spoke. Adewale studied her with the intensity of a man used to peeling back lies in boardrooms. Finally he leaned forward. "You saved my son. For that, I owe you more than money can buy." Amara shook her head quickly. "Please sir, I don't want a reward. I only did what anyone should do." "Don't insult me," Adewale replied, his voice firm but curious. "Most people would have frozen. You didn't? Why?" Amara's eyes flickered with something unspoken, memories she dared not reveal. She lowered her gaze. "Because no child deserves to die when someone can help." Adewale sat back, intrigued. She was different. Unlike the women who surrounded him for wealth and status, this one carried herself with quiet strength. In that moment, a spark of curiosity ignited in his heart. Who was Amara really? The following week, Adewale made a decision that surprised even his closest staff. Instead of sending Amara back to her duties at the hotel, he invited her to his estate in Ikoyi. Not as a maid, but as David's companion. When the black SUV pulled up to the staff entrance of the hotel, Amara nearly refused. She clutched her small bag tightly, shaking her head at the driver. "Please? I don't belong in a billionaire's house." The driver gave a polite but firm reply. "Mr. Johnson insisted." "He says you do." The Johnson estate was a world Amara hadn't seen in years. Sprawling gardens, fountains dancing in the sunlight, and glass walls that reflected Lagos' golden skyline. David came running down the marble steps the moment she arrived. "Auntie Amara," he cried, throwing his little arms around her waist. His joy was uncontainable. Amara bent down, hugging him tightly. Something in her chest warmed, a feeling she hadn't allowed herself to feel since her father's death: belonging. From the balcony above, Adewale watched silently. For years, David had been quiet, withdrawn, the loss of his mother leaving a shadow over him. Yet here he was, smiling, because of this woman. Later, at dinner, Adewale sat at the head of the long oak table, his eyes subtly fixed on Amara as she helped David cut his food and whispered encouragement when the boy struggled with his fork. She was patient, gentle, qualities money could never buy. "David," Adewale said casually, "you seem happier these days." David grinned. "Because Auntie Amara is here. She listens to me, Daddy. She tells me stories." "Stories?" Adewale raised an eyebrow. Amara flushed slightly. "Just simple ones, sir. About courage and kindness." Something stirred in Adewale's chest, an unfamiliar admiration. Most women in his circles spoke of designer bags, vacations in Paris, or his net worth. But this maid, this stranger, taught his son about values that mattered. Over the next few days, Amara became a constant presence in the house. She and David painted in the garden, laughed over board games, and even coaxed Adewale into joining them once. For the first time in years, the house echoed with laughter instead of silence. One evening, after David had gone to bed, Adewale found Amara in the garden, gazing at the stars. He approached quietly. "You've changed him," he said, his deep voice breaking the stillness. Amara startled, then shook her head. "No. I've only reminded him that he's still a child. Children deserve joy, no matter what they've lost." Adewale studied her face, the quiet strength in her eyes, the way she carried her pain without showing it. There was something more to her, he was sure of it. But he didn't press. Instead, he said softly, "You've reminded me too." Their eyes met. For a brief moment, billionaire and maid stood as equals, two souls bound by the boy who needed them both. And without realizing it, Adewale's curiosity had begun to shift into something deeper. The news of Adewale Johnson's unusual house guest spread faster than wildfire through Lagos elite circles. By the end of the month, whispers floated at every cocktail party and business meeting. A billionaire spending time with a maid? One woman sneered over champagne at a gala. "Surely he's lost his senses." Another laughed. "Watch. She'll trap him. They always do." Rumors grew sharper, twisting facts. Some claimed Amara had bewitched him, others said she was scheming to climb the social ladder. None of them knew the truth, that she had saved his son, and that her presence had brought light back into their home. One evening, Adewale attended a business dinner at Victoria Island. As he entered the hall, he felt the shift in the air. Conversations dipped, eyes followed him, and smirks flickered across painted lips. "Mr. Johnson," a wealthy investor chuckled as they shook hands, "we hear your heart has been stolen by your maid." Laughter erupted around the table. Adewale's jaw tightened. He responded calmly, his voice low and steady, "A woman who saves a life deserves more respect than those who only count their money." The room fell silent. His words cut deeper than any shout could. Still, he left the dinner earlier than planned, a storm brewing inside him. At home, Amara sensed his mood immediately. He sat in his study, tie loosened, staring at the city lights. She knocked gently and stepped in. "Is everything all right?" she asked softly. He turned, his eyes hard. "They mock me. Because of you." Her heart clenched. "I never wanted to cause you shame. If you want, I can leave." "No." The word was sharp, almost desperate. He stood, pacing. "Do you think I care about their gossip? You brought my son back to life. You gave him joy again. That's worth more than all their opinions combined." Amara lowered her gaze. She wanted to thank him, but fear gnawed at her chest. If he ever discovered who she truly was, the hidden heiress running from betrayal, would he still defend her so fiercely? The tension reached David too. At school, children whispered about his father's maid friend. One afternoon he stormed into the house, eyes red. "Daddy, they laughed at me," he cried. "They said Auntie Amara is just a servant and that we're stupid for keeping her here." Adewale knelt beside his son, pulling him close. His voice was firm. "Listen to me, David. People can have money and still be poor in character. Amara is richer than any of them in the things that truly matter: kindness, courage, and heart. Don't you ever feel ashamed of her." Amara's eyes watered as she stood in the doorway, overhearing his words. Her secret still hung between them like a shadow, but for the first time she wondered if Adewale might be the one man who could see beyond wealth or status. Amara thought she had buried her past beneath years of silence, but the past has a way of clawing back. One evening, while she walked through Balogun Market to buy simple clothes for David, a voice cut through the noise. "Amara?" Her heart froze. She turned to see Ngozi, an old family friend, staring at her in shock. "It is you. I thought you vanished after Chief Obi's death," Ngozi exclaimed. Amara forced a smile. "You must be mistaken." She turned quickly, but Ngozi's words chased her. No one could mistake the face of the Obi heiress. Shoppers glanced curiously and panic surged. Amara ducked into an alley, her breath ragged. She had lived under the radar for so long, how much longer before others discovered her? That night, as she tucked David into bed, she masked her fear with a smile. But Adewale noticed her trembling hands. "You're hiding something," he said softly when they were alone in the hall. Amara flinched. I can't. Can't or won't." His eyes locked on hers. She looked away, unable to bear the weight of his gaze. "Please, just let me stay as I am." Frustration burned in Adewale. He was a man who could unravel the most complicated deals, yet this woman remained a puzzle he could not solve. And despite himself, he wanted to. Meanwhile, in another part of Lagos, Amara's greedy relatives gathered in a smoky sitting room. Her uncle, Chief Emeka, slammed a newspaper onto the table. "Look at this. She's alive, living with Adewale Johnson of all people." Another relative hissed, "If she marries him, we lose everything. We must destroy her before she reclaims her inheritance." Plans began to form, lies, bribes, and betrayal sharpening like knives in the dark. A few days later, Adewale hosted a charity banquet. Amara was reluctant to attend, but David insisted. "Please, Auntie Amara, you'll be my guest." She arrived in a simple navy gown, borrowed from one of the housekeepers. But the moment she entered the glittering hall, whispers swirled like smoke. Cameras flashed. Guests leaned close to one another. "Isn't that Amara Obi? The missing heiress?" Adewale caught the words, his chest tightening. He turned to Amara, who stood frozen, her face pale. "Is it true?" he demanded quietly, his voice low but sharp. Amara's lips parted, but no words came. The walls of secrecy she had built were crumbling. Before she could answer, Chief Emeka stepped into the light with a smirk. "Ladies and gentlemen," he announced loudly, "may I introduce you to Amara Obi, the heiress who abandoned her legacy, now parading as a maid in the home of a billionaire." Gasps filled the room. Cameras clicked like gunfire. And Adewale's world tilted on its axis. After the banquet fiasco, silence hung in Adewale's mansion like a storm before lightning. Amara sat at the edge of her bed, her hands clasped tightly, waiting. The door opened. Adewale stepped in, his face unreadable. "So it's true," he said coldly. "You're not a maid. You're Amara Obi, the missing billionaire heiress." Tears stung her eyes. "Yes, but I had no choice. They tried to destroy me. I had to hide." "You lied to me," Adewale snapped. "To my son. You let us believe." "I never lied," she interrupted, her voice shaking. "I only never told you the truth. I wanted to be seen as me, not as money. Do you know what it's like to be loved only for your wealth? To be hunted by your own family?" His anger faltered. He saw the raw pain in her eyes, pain he recognized. He too had lived surrounded by greed and pretense. But the betrayal still cut deep. The next morning the tabloids screamed headlines. "Heiress hides as maid, now living in billionaire's home." "Scandal rocks Johnson household." Business partners began calling, questioning his judgment. The whispers grew louder, harsher. Chief Emeka, sensing victory, fueled the fire. He leaked forged documents to the press, painting Amara as unstable, accusing her of abandoning her inheritance to escape debt. At school, David overheard cruel jokes about his maid mother. He came home in tears, clinging to Amara. "Don't leave us," he begged. Her heart broke. She had wanted nothing more than to protect him from her world. Instead, her world had crashed into his. That night, Adewale sat in his study, staring at Amara's file, one his private investigator had put together. Every detail confirmed her story: her father's sudden death, the stolen inheritance, the threats that forced her into hiding. Amara entered quietly. "If you want me to leave, I will. I never meant to bring you shame." Adewale lifted his eyes, searching hers. For a long moment, neither spoke. Finally, he said, "I don't care about the shame. I care about trust. Tell me everything." So she did. Through tears, she told him of her father's empire, her relatives' betrayal, and her years of living in shadows. When she finished, silence filled the room. Then Adewale reached across the desk, his hand covering hers. "I married you in my heart the day you saved my son. Not because you were a maid. Not because you're an heiress. But because you showed me love money cannot buy." Her breath caught. For the first time she believed him. But outside the mansion gates, Chief Emeka's schemes grew darker. And the battle for her inheritance and their love was just beginning.